words, okay? When the Lord your God cuts off from before you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you displace them and dwell in their land, take heed to yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? I also will do likewise. So you shall not worship the Lord your God in that way. For every abomination to the Lord which he hates, they have done to their gods. Okay? For they burn their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. Whatever I command you, be careful to observe it. You shall not add to it, nor take away from it. And this is found specifically at Deuteronomy 12:29 through 32. So a lot of times, I've talked about this many times, is when people, whether you go to, church, a particular church, or you, have services virtually, you look at different things. A lot of pastors, reverends, or whatever, religious leaders, not all of them, will say that certain areas, certain topics are unclear in the Bible. Now, God is many things, but one thing that he is clear, okay, about, what's the whole point? It's kind of like the other episode. What's the whole point of him inspiring man to write this book, but yet it's just one big puzzle? It's to be read, it's to be comprehended, and it's meant to be followed, okay? So there's purpose. Everything that he does has a purpose and has a meaning to it, okay? Regretfully, the Israelites often failed to heed God's warning. Now, time and time again, they let their fascination with the religious practices of those around them get the better of them as they lapsed into idolatrous worship. Now, in the 600s, BC, God gave 3 more warnings against this kind of behavior. First, through the prophet Jeremiah, and God said, do not learn the way of the Gentiles. Do not be dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the Gentiles are dismayed at them. This is found in Jeremiah 10:2. Here, God cautioned his people again against following the Gentile or non-Israelite practices of worshiping the heavenly bodies, like the sun, on December 25th, and against astrology in general. Now, in the following verses, of Jeremiah 10, in verses 3 through 9, God describes some of their idolatrous customs. They cut a tree from the forest, prop it up, and decorate it with precious metals. Now, although this account is specifically referring to setting up an object of idolatrous worship, at verses 6 and 8, God's command here says this: do not learn the way of the Gentiles applies to all pagan religious customs. So we're talking about Christmas trees, mistletoe, and colorful lights that come from pagan winter solstice celebrations. We're going to be talking about rabbits and Easter eggs are actually fertility symbols. We're talking about the demonic concepts at Halloween. They all fit under the umbrella of this prohibition, prohibit. These are things that you should not be celebrating, entertaining at all. Now, likewise, a number of other modern traditions, such as New Year's Day celebration, Valentine's Day, also fit under this particular category. These are prohibition, as they too originate, these holidays, New Year's Day, Valentine's Day, under pagan worship. Okay, so in giving this instruction against learning the way of the Gentiles, God wanted his people to avoid the type of sin that their forefathers had actually committed with the golden calf. All right, now a few years after this statement in Jeremiah, God again expressed his anger with his people when he said this, "For they have committed adultery, and blood is on their hands. They have committed adultery with their idols, and even sacrificed their sons, whom they bore to me, passing them through the fire to devour them. Moreover, they have done this to me. They have defiled my sanctuary on the same day and profaned my Sabbaths. For they, after they have slain their children for these idols on the same day and came into my sanctuary to profane it, and indeed thus they had done in the midst of my house." And this is found in Ezekiel 23:37 through 39. So here it appears that Israel practiced one of the customs like those originally associated with Saturnalia and the worship of Satan. I almost want to say Satan, which, Saturn, which is the sacrificing of children, and then came to worship God on one of his Sabbaths. So you can't go over here and worship Satan. Oh, Satan. See, I said it again. Saturn, Saturnalia, whatever, and then hop, skip, and jump up in the in the sanctuary on the Sabbath of God. Through the prophet Zephaniah, God decried those who worship the host of heaven on the housetops, those who worship and swear oaths by the Lord, but who also swear by Malcham. And that's found at Zephaniah 1, verse 5. God is not pleased when people are double-minded. And this reference is found in James 1:8 as well as James 4:8 in their worship, meaning accepting false religions and customs while professing to worship him. Now, some people wrongly assume that the Old Testament prohibitions against mixing paganism with godly worship were annulled during episcopal, that's not right, times, apostolic times. Nothing could be further from the truth. To prove the continuity of God's teaching, of the New Testament, let us consider first the city of Corinth. Here we find one of the most instructive examples about incorporating paganism into Christianity. Now, strategically located just south of the narrow isthmus connecting central Greece, this particular city sat on an important trade route. Its inhabitants grew rich by transporting goods across the 4 miles, which saved merchants about a 200-mile trip by ship. Now, the worship of the goddess of love, Aphrodite, had long been part of this city's history. It also boasted a temple of Apollo, which was the Greek sun god. Now, what was Corinth like in the 1st century? Here the Apostle Paul established a flourishing church made up of a cross-section of the worldly-minded people who had flocked to Corinth to participate in the gambling, legalized temple prostitution, business adventures, and amusements available in this 1st century Navy town. It says, the city soon became a melting pot for the approximately 500,000 people who lived there at the time of Paul's arrival. Merchants and sailors anxious to work the docks migrated to Corinth. Now, professional gamblers and athletes betting on the games also took up residency. Slaves, sometimes freed with no place to go, roamed the streets. They roamed the streets day and night. And the prostitutes, both male and female, were quite abundant. Now, people from Rome, the rest of Greece, Egypt, Asia Minor, and